Afternoon, everyone. I'm Thomas Murray Dawson with Center for Political Education, and I'm joining you from the occupied lands of the Ohlone people in the East Bay of California. We encourage all our participants on this call located in the Bay Area to pay their Shumi land tax, which you can do by following the link in the chat. The chat, as usual, will be disabled for these calls, except for us to share information with the audience. So if you have questions you'd like to get answered by any of the speakers during this call, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We'll try our best to answer them there in the time we have or in the follow-up email. In that same toolbar, you can find the CC button to enable closed captioning. We're also grateful to have ASL interpreters on hand throughout this call. On behalf of CPE, Bay Resistance, Arab Resource and Organizing Center, and the Anti-Police Terror Project, welcome to Palestine Solidarity Announcements. We're getting started on time today to make sure we can make as much time as possible for our featured conversation. So I'm going to run through the agenda really quickly right now. So as usual, we're happy to welcome back Melissa Fan to do a brief semantics practice before we get started. Then I'll share an abbreviated update on political developments. And finally, we'll spend most of our time with the conversation between Sahar Francis of Adamir and Mohammed Sheikh from Critical Resistance. Thanks again for joining us today. And as usual, please keep up the fight to free Palestine. And with that, let's bring up Melissa.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. We have an extra short somatic practice today to make ample room for the wonderful speakers. So let's jump right in. Taking notice of your body without judgment, just noticing the sensations, returning to your breath, finding your feet, noticing any places that you feel tense or relaxed, places that you might feel neutral, places in your body that are calling your attention, or maybe that feel numb. Just noticing all of this without judgment and taking stock of where you are personally today. And from this place, see if you can tune into the part of you which is inherently dignified. We know from the testimonies of political prisoners across time and culture that despite external conditions of imprisonment, there remains an internal life which is sovereign, a place from which we can live our deepest principles in the most extreme circumstances. We see this in the inherent dignity of Palestinians on the ground every single day. And the fact that each of you is here fighting for Palestinian liberation means that you are already acting from this place, recognizing the inherent dignity of all peoples. So really today, throughout this call and throughout the rest of your day, I'm inviting you to tap into this embodiment, the somatic experience of inherent dignity, of an internal place that is sovereign. Feeling it in your breath, in your chest. Sometimes it helps to roll your shoulders back and hold your head high, inviting your breath into the entire length of your body. Thanks for practicing with me today, and free Palestine.
Melissa, as always, thank you so much for providing us with the semantics grounding and always tying it to what is happening each week. All right. So there was a lot that happened this week on the ground in Gaza here in the US and among the international community. Usually we don't get to all of it in our weekly update anyway, but this week we'll cover even less to make room for our featured discussion. So I apologize if we miss anything you believe is critical. Let me highlight just a few things in my abbreviated update. Now, we normally begin with an overview of the destructive impacts to Palestinian lives and infrastructure and focus on what's happening on the ground. This time, I want to deliberately start with what's happening in the US and then shift back to what's happening on the ground in Gaza, because the point of the encampments that have exploded this week across college campuses in the United States is to keep all eyes on Gaza, especially given the recent revelations of some of the worst atrocities of this war and the looming possibility of an invasion of Rafah. Last week, we were talking about the beginnings of an encampment at Columbia University, the immediate repression experienced by students there, including the school president's decision to bring in the NYPD to clear the encampment. Now, a week later, that encampment has grown. The students are still there. They've received various movement leaders and politicians. They've fended off various attempts to have it disbanded. They've been condemned by Congress and the president. They've had faculty join them in protest. They've had to deal with attacks by Jewish Zionist and Christian Zionist far-right forces. And they've had Palestinians, Yemenis, and others whom are directly affected by the genocidal war express gratitude and solidarity with them from overseas through videos and statements. They're negotiating with the Columbia administration on their demands, and they've been nothing short of brave and inspirational and resilient. And they've sparked a wildfire of other encampments at other universities across the country, of which this map by Al Jazeera now only covers a few of the many. UC Berkeley, UCLA, Cal Poly Humboldt in California are just a few. City College and NYU in New York, Princeton, University of Minnesota, University of Maryland, University of Texas at Austin, and on and on and on. Private, public, Ivy, state. These encampments, these protests are well organized, well coordinated, and well attended. They have demands for divestment, for denouncement of the genocide, for protection of marginalized students, especially Palestinian, Arab, Black, and Indigenous students. They are also well attended by Jewish students, and they are most definitely active in not only fighting anti-Semitism, but fighting the Zionist co-optation of that term. And I think it can't be understated how effective and consistent the student movements have been in ensuring that the message to media or from their media spokespeople is squarely about focusing on Gaza right now and identifying that the repression they are experiencing is not comparable to what Palestinians in Gaza face, and that the repression is aimed at delegitimizing the focus on genocide and masking the current atrocities that are being exposed, which we'll talk about in a second. There are too many wonderful clips of speeches, chants, songs, and general photos of masses together to share, but you can find them easily online. If we have time at the end of this session, we will try to play a little bit from Mohammed El-Kurd's speech at UC Berkeley yesterday. And if not, we will send the link afterwards. So the students have also been met, not only at Columbia, but in many, if not most of their schools, with repression by school administrators and police. These are just some of the notable scenes from the past week. The Cal Poly Humboldt students who effectively held down a building and pushed riot cops back out of it, even after they came in with batons and shields. There's now a famous water cooler bottle in that scene that helps students in those efforts. The scene of police in Atlanta brutalizing a young Black street medic and other videos of students and faculty at Emory being violently beaten. This standoff with police at UT Austin that also turned violent and was a place where they used tear gas and rubber bullets against students. Liberal and right-wing politicians have seized this moment to villainize students, and Republican and Democratic local governments have all the same resorted to police repression to try to stamp them out. A big sign, in my estimation, of the kind of danger they see in the messaging the entanglements of funding and politics with Israel that many universities suffer under, and of course, of the basic function of police, which is to quell dissent, particularly as the crisis of legitimacy for U.S. imperialism and Zionism has become so sharp globally and domestically. But again, the focus here is on Gaza, and that's been the students' message all along. And as we say each week, this death toll number is not accurate, and it is an underreporting. Something of note to consider here in these graphics that we show from Al Jazeera each week is the percentage of school buildings damaged, 90% and 100% of universities, which is a strong point of solidarity for the current encampments. I said it last week, and I said the week before, we would be returning to more news about Al-Shifa Hospital and now Nasser Hospital. Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis is where they unearthed hundreds of bodies this week, now believed to be including as many as 700 people. Many of them at Nasser were doctors and patients and even children, and many of whom among those groups have shown signs of being summarily executed, having their arms tied behind their backs, and even dismembered and tortured. There are estimates that after 2 weeks at Al-Shifa, the total number of individuals killed there might be as high as 1,500. And the UN is calling for a full investigation into the mass graves at both hospitals. And there's ample photographic images of disfigured and mutilated corpses that are circulating as evidence on social media. As this Red Crescent worker has asked, why do we have children in mass graves? So truly monstrous scenes. And this will continue to be something that we should be paying attention to, demanding accountability for, and ensuring it doesn't get swallowed up by coverage of U.S. protests or political wrangling domestically. Which brings me to my last slide here in this abbreviated update, which is about Rafah. These headlines are all within the last day or so. This New York Times headline frames the Rafah invasion as inevitable, citing some dissenting analysts who believe it is not, but claiming that most government officials and political analysts think it's a matter of when, not if. It quotes Zionist political think tanks and some U.S. officials on their reservations about moving forward without a clear plan to manage civilians who are now concentrated in Rafah. And the Israeli newspapers and the Israeli government and some of their think tanks are, obviously advancing claims that Rafah must be invaded to eliminate Hamas's tunnel infrastructure and smuggling network for arms and equipment. The Israeli newspapers are indicating that Netanyahu is making a political calculation to pursue the Rafah operation, which we know far-right members of his coalition government have been pushing for, rather than making a hostage deal. And in particular, this Haaretz analysis includes, some statements that a Rafah operation will probably jeopardize the remaining hostages and not topple Hamas, and discusses some of the parameters for hostage releases that are being discussed, including a ceasefire, or at least a temporary one, protecting Hamas leadership from attacks. And as the Axios article here indicates, that Hamas has actually been trying to exchange Israeli hostages, around 40 in poor medical condition, for the release of roughly 900 Palestinian prisoners. And all of this is happening as Israeli attacks and bombings in Rafah have increased over the last few days, and it should concern all of us that Israel has changed its position on the number of hostages that should be released, expressed public skepticism about reaching a deal, and of course has proven to be unreliable in its intentions, especially given the bloodthirstiness of the right-wing factions in Israel who've threatened to pull their support for Netanyahu, who is prosecuting this war, as we know and we've discussed before, to avoid his own criminal prosecution and ostensibly the end of his political career. As I mentioned, political prisoner releases are a key aspect of negotiations, and I'm sure we'll get some important context here from Sahar Francis on how important the system of imprisonment is to understanding the larger political situation in Palestine before and through the current escalation into genocide. As usual, we ask that you take a look at AROC's calendar to get it more involved. Text PSA to this number, especially in advance of direct actions that will be happening next week for May Day. And please sign up for the PAL Media Tracker to keep up to date on some of the latest stories. So with that, we're now honored to welcome Sahar Francis. Sahar is a Palestinian human rights defender and the general director of the Palestinian human rights organization, Adamir Prisoner Support and Human Rights Association. Sahar is a lawyer and has worked for years promoting human rights in the face of Israeli occupation in the Palestinian territories. And as director of Adamir, she focuses on the political and civil rights issues in the occupied Palestine territory, especially those of Palestinian prisoners and detainees. And she'll be in conversation with our dear comrade and a leader in critical resistance, Mohammed Sheikh. Sahar and Mohammed, it's an honor to have both of you here. And with that, Mohammed, the mic is now yours.
Thank you so much, Thomas, and thank you to the organizations, the Center for Political Education, to AROC, to the Anti-Police Terror Project, and to Bay Resistance for holding these extremely crucial updates every week since the genocide began. We're really honored to be here, and I'm especially honored to welcome Sahar Francis, the General Director of Ad-Damir, one of the most crucial and important organizations on the ground in Palestine that does the tireless work of supporting Palestinian prisoners detained by the Israeli regime. So I'm actually not going to do a lot of grounding. I want you all to hear directly from Sahar. So Sahar, it's my honor to welcome you, and I want to pass it to you to share your thoughts and your news with us.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Mohammed and Thomas, for inviting me and giving me this platform to share with you today the experience and the latest news of the Palestinian political prisoners. And actually allow me to start by highlighting that the issue of imprisonment and the military system, whether the military courts, the military orders, and the system of control that the occupation is imposing on the Palestinians since the first day of the occupation actually becomes the main tool of the oppression and the control, and it's weaponized every time that there is a security need and a tension. And from the occupation side, they would launch mass arrest campaigns whenever they think that it will protect and benefit their interest in the political level in order to pressure the Palestinian side in any negotiations. And this was the case, or to oppress any resistance from the people, whether in the first intifada, in the second intifada, they were weaponizing the issue of administrative detention in the years of the Oslo period between the two intifadas. Those who were opposing the Oslo process were subjected for administrative detention. They did so in the 2021 kind of uprising that they suppressed, and they arrested hundreds of people, and they're doing definitely the same strategies in more like widespread manner and more violations that we will discuss. And I will tell you a lot about the collective punishments, the intimidation and the violations that the prisoners face on daily basis. But actually the fact that currently there is 9,500 Palestinian detainees just from the West Bank and East Jerusalem. This is not including the thousands that were arrested from Gaza, whether in the 7th of October, the 8th, the first week, or after the physical invasion to Gaza Strip, because they never shared any accurate statistics about how many they arrested from Gaza, where they are allocating these people, under which circumstances, what's the legal justification for arresting all these thousands of people, and so on. So immediately after the 7th of October, they started with amending the whole set of the military orders and the civil laws that should be applicable on the prisoners in order to make it easier for the army, for the police, for the military courts, for the prison authority to deal with these thousands of people that they were planning to arrest. And it's the case in every conflict. Like every time there is a security escalation, they will start by amending, changing the law, because the law is actually the main tool that they use in order to justify all these policies of oppression and torture. So they amended the military order in relation to administrative detention in order to make the periods longer, so they don't have to bring the detainee within 96 hours in front of a judge, but now it's 8 days. And and they can sign the order in these 8 days, and then they have another extra 12 days in order to bring the detainee for the first session of the judicial review for the administrative detention order. They amended the civil law. You should know that the military system is applicable in the West Bank against Palestinians living in the West Bank. In some cases, it's applicable on people from East Jerusalem as well. But those from Gaza, whether they are arrested inside the state or from Gaza or from the West Bank, they would be treated in the system, the criminal and civil system, civil courts inside Israel, not the military orders in the West Bank. So they also amended the criminal procedures in relation to the arrest and detention for interrogation purposes and made it longer, the extension of detention and the ban on lawyer visit, and how long they can keep you under interrogation before charging you. And it's around 6 months now that they can interrogate you. They can ban you from lawyer visit for 6 months. Also, they did similar changes to the illegal competent law. This is the special law that Israel initiated back in 2002 against the Lebanese detainees who were kidnapped from Lebanon in order to gather information about the Israeli pilot Ron Arad, who got missed in the Lebanese war in the 80s. And they are applying this law against internationals. And now people from Gaza, since the withdrawal from Gaza in 2005, they're using this law. It's very similar to administrative detention in the meaning that it's based on secret information. They don't have to present any evidences to the court, and they can issue a warrant arrest open-ended. It's not limited for 6 months or 4 months as the administrative detention. It's an open-end detention, but every 6 months they have to do a judicial review in front of the court to decide whether it's going to continue. They can keep you in detention based on the secret information, or the court can decide otherwise. But of course, you can imagine under such security emergency situation that they declared since the 7th, everything would become justified by the court on security basis. And this was the base for arresting all the thousands of people from Gaza. At the beginning, workers, like there were more than 4,000 workers arrested in the 7th and the 8th of October. Some of them, around 3,500, were released after 1 month or a bit longer without any legal procedures. these workers that we interviewed, they were reporting that they were interrogated, asked generally about any information they would know. They were treated so badly, but they were released without meeting any judge or any lawyer, nothing. And later, when they were also, some of the detainees were transferred for interrogation, and those who are still arrested from Gaza till today, some of them, they would be also released after 40 days, 45 days without any legal procedures. Some of them, they would be sent under the illegal competent, or they would be transferred for interrogation in 2 interrogation centers, Beit Tikva and Ashkelon, that they are keeping the detainees from Gaza under interrogation. They would be extended again according to the civil system. In the West Bank and East Jerusalem, they also immediately launched mass arrest campaigns against almost anyone, like all those who were ex-prisoners and they were arrested before, they were under the threat that they could be rearrested. And they started actually to rearrest people that they were just released a couple of months ago or last year or whatever. And most of the people were immediately sent for administrative detention, 6 months administrative detention or 4 months administrative detention. They also started to attack journalists, students, activists, political leaders, elderly, children, women, everyone could be unionist. Just this week, one of the people, the political leaders, a community leader, Omar Assaf, a very well-known unionist who was released after 6 months. And believe me, personally, I know this man for at least 25 years. When I saw his picture after the release, I couldn't realize him. I said, he's not like, I couldn't believe that this is the same person I know from before 6 months. And this is the image of Omar Assaf, reflects the bad conditions that these prisoners are facing inside the Israeli prisons in the last 6 months. So far, since the 7th of October till today, they arrested more than 8,445 people. This includes more than 540 children, more than 280 women, and more than 66 journalists. But of course, not all of the people would remain in detention, because before the 7th, the total number was 5,200 detainees. Currently, it's 9,500. So some of them, they would be released after a couple of weeks. The majority of the people would be sent for administrative detention. In these months, they issued more than 5,210 administrative orders. Currently, there's 3,660 administrative detainees, and this is the highest figure since the occupation in 1967. In one moment, I mean, to have 3,600 administrative detainees in one point. There is children under administrative detention, and it's the highest number of children to be arrested under administrative detention ever. More than 40 children now under administrative detention. There's more than 22 women under administrative detention. And there's Palestinian political leaders who were elected as parliamentarians. But you know, we don't have a parliament anymore, because a couple of years ago, the president canceled the parliament. But we still refer to them as parliamentarians. There's around 13 parliamentarians. They are arrested under administrative detention. All of these people were facing a very severe force in the moment of the arrest, because we're documenting a very sharp increase in the excessive use of force in the first moment of the arrest, when the soldiers raided the houses in a very violent way. They can attack the whole family. They usually explode the door before entering to any home in the West Bank, and they caused a death and serious injuries in some cases. They killed one brother in Colombia that they came to arrest his brother, and when they exploded the door, and it was in the first weeks of the in October, still in October. And the violence will continue in the whole way from the house till the detention facility. It would be including as well, beside the direct physical attacks, a very humiliating strip search that would be imposed against literally anyone. This is also an increase in this use of strip search against all the detainees, whether they are elderly, women, children, men. Everyone would be several times in this process of detention, strip search. And in the time of the search, there's lots of intimidation, verbal and physical attacks that could amount to sexual harassment in some cases, especially against women and children. And even men prisoners were reporting about sexual harassment under the strip search that they were facing. And even if you're sitting in the prison, whenever they take you out to the room where you have to attend the court session via video conference, they will implement the strip search. If they take you for interrogation, they will implement the strip search. So the detainees would face strip search several times in the period. They immediately in the prisons, in all of the prisons, after the 7th, on the same day and the week after, because the government gave a green light, they declared an emergency situation inside the prisons. So the prison authority started to cut water, starvation policy. They minimized the amount of food and the number of meals they offer every day. They started cutting water and electricity in all the sections, in all the prisons. Like at the beginning, at the first 2-3 months, they were receiving water just 2 hours or 1 hour sometimes a day, or 3 hours maximum. They totally closed the whole prisons, like they canceled totally the family visits. There's no family visits till today. Also, the Red Cross Committee, that they are the only international site that can have access to these prisons, are not allowed to visit. We, the lawyers, were banned for at least the first 2 months. Now we're visiting, but with lots of complications and restrictions. Like there's so many procedures that they impose in order to ban us from visit in a normal way. They restricted the number of the detainees that we can meet. And every complaint by any detainee would be faced with a collective punishment for the whole room that this detainee is sitting in. And usually it's using lots of physical violence against these detainees, beatings, kicking them with wooden sticks or the iron sticks, attacking their rooms with dogs, or using bullet like gas tire inside the rooms. So far, and of course, they totally closed all the clinics in the prisons, so they are not offering a proper health treatment in proper time for the detainees, especially for those who have chronic diseases or more serious illnesses. And we lost 16 detainees just from the West Bank and East Jerusalem since the 7th of October. Some of them, they were beaten to death, or they were physically attacked and were never treated. And after 1 week or couple of days, they were dying out of the lack of health treatment after such brutal physical attack. Some of them, they were just left to die inside the prison, and the prison authority were aware that they're having serious illnesses. Like Walid Daqqa was the last martyr that we lost, a very well a known writer and a long-time prisoner who spent 38 years, and his body, actually all of the 16 that we lost in these 6 months, their bodies are still kept with the Israeli side. And there is other 10 detainees who died before, and their bodies are still kept with the prison authority. And this is another issue of a collective punishment against the families, because when the person is dying or died, why you keep his body? Like you cannot punish him. That's over. The punishment is toward the family, that you're not enabling the family to bury their beloved ones in a dignified way. And the policy of health neglect, it was always a very serious problem inside the prison authority system, that we always documented health neglect cases, and we were referring cases for outside like organizations like Physicians for Human Rights, or on the international level, complaining about the health neglect policies, but it was escalating after the 7th of October. And these punishments, they canceled the recreation time. So now the detainees are locked in their rooms for more than 23 hours a day. The high number of detainees caused a serious crowdedness inside the cells and the rooms in the prisons. Each room that usually had 6 or 7 people, 8 people, now will host minimum 12 or 14 people. Most of the people, they are forced sleeping on the ground with very thin mattresses. They confiscated all the clothes and the belongings of the prisoners from their rooms, and they are just allowing them the clothes that they wear. So they are forced to wash their clothes and re-wear them while wet. And it was winter, and they had their winter clothes. Now it's very hot, it's summer already in Palestine, and they never offered them the summer clothes. And you can imagine those that they are arrested in the desert, in Qtzi'ot, in Ramon, in Sdeit Iman, the detention facility for those from Gaza, that they would be not allowed to have another pair of clothes. And they limited the time of the shower. They limited the ability to receive even the cleaning stuff to wash their room, to clean the room. So the conditions in total are very bad. And like I cannot recall a period where me as a lawyer working for the last 30 years with the prisoners, such very bad conditions inside the prisons, that not just like individuals or a group of prisoners suffer from in one prison or 2 prisons. It's against all the 9,500 people who are sitting there. And you can imagine what would be the conditions for children. And there's such total disconnection from the outside world, disconnected from their families. They're not allowed to have any phone calls with their families, terrified and threatened 24 hours a day. And no wonder, I'm sure you saw the images from the exchange deal on November, when some of these children were released after being physically attacked, and some of them, the injuries were very clear on their faces or in their hands. One of them, he was with 2 broken hands when he was released. The woman would be as well suffering from very bad conditions in these circumstances, especially with the fear of the sexual harassment and intimidation all the time. And it's literally happening on daily basis, all these violations. Those from Gaza, it's really also the the situation of those from Gaza, what we managed to gather from documentation and interviews that we implemented with those who were released. Because so far, no lawyer or any organization, not international, not the Red Cross, not the Palestinian lawyers, no one is allowed to visit prisoners from Gaza. The prison authority disclosed that they are arresting 849 detainees from Gaza, classified as illegal combatants in the civil system, the prison civil system in Israel, but they are separated like they are in the same prisons with the other Palestinian prisoners, but totally separated in other sections, no communication at all. So the woman, for example, the Palestinian women from the West Bank informed us that they know that there is women from Gaza brought to Damoun, the prison for female prisoners, but they couldn't communicate with them. So they didn't, they were not able to tell us how many they are there and in which conditions they were kept, and so on. Currently, more or less, we know maybe there's 6 women from Gaza that they are still held in Damoun, but we don't know how many women or children are arrested from Gaza, because there's also 2 detention facilities, military detention facilities, one near Jerusalem, Anatot, and the other one in the desert near Bir Saba city, Sdei Man. These facilities are very, according to the description we're receiving from released detainees, it's very similar to the Guantanamo conditions. They're in cage, like kind of, it's separated for like several sections, each like 100 or sometimes 120 would be kept in the same cage. They're handcuffed and shackled 24 hours, 7 days a week. And if they dare to complain about anything or even to talk to each other while sitting on their knees the whole day, they would be punished by being tied to the wire in the section. They are facing lots of torture and humiliation, intimidation, physical attacks. Elderly people who were released from Sdei Man, they were with very severe injuries out of the handcuffs on their hands and in their legs. And an Israeli doctor, a soldier, it seems he served in this Sdei Man facility as a doctor. He was issuing an article in Haaretz 2 weeks ago confirming that they were forced to cut hands and legs of detainees out of health complications because of the tying 24 hours a day. And in very bad conditions, these detainees in the kind of medical center that was initiated in this facility, they would be tied to the beds 24 hours, like with their hands and legs 24 hours a day. Even they don't allow them to go to the toilet, so they do use diapers for them, and they feed them with like a tube. So it's horrible conditions, and Haaretz reporter confirmed that she received information from the army about 27 cases of detainees from Gaza who died so far from the 7th of October till today. This is the number that they disclosed. She suspects that the number is higher. According to these testimonies we're collecting, it seems lots of people are losing their life, whether out of torture or medical complications. They're arresting disabled people and sick people, and they don't offer them proper treatment. And of course, the starvation as well against the people from Gaza is used. The restrictions on the cleaning stuff and the ability to change, they don't offer them any clothes to change or when they allow them to do the shower, they ask them to do the shower in less than 3 minutes. They literally count to 50, like from 1 to 50, and you have to finish your shower. So the conditions are so bad. And it's very clear for us that the whole issue is gathering as much as they can just in order to use it, in order to use these people as a bargaining chip in any exchange deal. There's no, especially those from the West Bank. And all these thousands that they are arresting from Gaza, it's for intelligence gathering information. They think by arresting so many civilians, they can get information about the situation inside Gaza. Because like most of the people, most of the detainees from the West Bank, even if they are prosecuted, the most charges, the common charges that we see in the military courts are based on social media activism, incitement for violence. For any post that you dare to share, showing sympathy with the people in Gaza, or talking about or criticizing the genocide in Gaza, you would be arrested and blamed to be supporting terrorism, supporting Hamas, or supporting illegal organization, inciting for violence. Most of the journalists that they are facing accusations, this is the kind of accusation, or students, or community leaders or activists that they are accused. They would be accused of incitement to violence and supporting illegal organization. Children would be arrested mostly as well, either for social media activism or throwing stones. Even if you throw stone in a demonstration, and they could release you in conditions, they don't. They keep you in detention. There is 10 children. Some of them, they even became elderly in these months between November and now, that they were released in the exchange deal, and they were rearrested after a couple of months, like last month or so, and sent back for administrative detention. So the case, and I will end here, the case of prisoners is a very important case in the whole struggle. It's always weaponized and used by the Israeli side in order to pressure the Palestinian side. You should keep in mind, Walid Daqqa was supposed to be released in the Oslo agreement, division of the prisoners and the exchange and the release of the prisoners, because he was arrested much before the Oslo agreement. And he was in the fourth round of the people from before Oslo to be released. And it was the decision of Netanyahu as a prime minister then not to release the last and the fourth group of these detainees. And this is how Walid ended up finishing 38 years and dying inside the prison out of health neglect and severe cancer disease that he was analyzed last year. And the refuse to release him, an early release because of health conditions, says as well a lot about the revenge of the system against these prisoners. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sahar, for giving us all of that really important information. There was a lot there. I wanted to just kind of like back up and provide maybe kind of an overall just highlight recap, and just so folks understand the context of some of the important things that Sahar named. So the Israeli prison system and the system of imprisonment is one of the core tools of its colonial repression against the Palestinian people. One of the main tools that it uses within that is administrative detention, which is the detaining and imprisoning of Palestinians without charge, and all evidence of why the people are being imprisoned is kept secret. So there's no ability really to wage a legal defense. And that can happen indefinitely, right? One thing to also note is, for those of us in the United States, we're often familiar with, or should be familiar with the fact that the United States imprisons more people than any other country in the world, in the history of the world, right? And that we have one of the highest rates of imprisonment. 1 in 5 Palestinians have been imprisoned. That means that Israel has the highest rate of imprisonment in the world against Palestinians, right? So it is a very common shared experience of the Palestinian struggle, is the struggle of prisoners. Sahar touched on the daily torture, the mistreatment, the abuse, the medical neglect, the restricting of the most basic human needs of prisoners, like appropriate clothing, hygiene, proper food. And given all of that, as Sahar noted, the prisoner struggle in Palestine is often referred to as the beating heart of the liberation movement more broadly. And so the steadfastness and the resilience of prisoners is really held up high by all aspects of Palestinian civic society and struggle. And I want to, there were a couple of questions that I'll want to raise, and here's also just a plug for anyone to ask any more questions in the Q&A. And I see some folks have gone in to do that, which is great. But I want to start, usually I save this for the end, but I actually want to start with this. I know that the situation is very bleak. You talked about how Israel has almost total control, is able to change laws, whenever there's a security escalation, whenever it wants to, that basically restricts all access to prisoners. Prisoners are not able to have lawyers visit them, family members visit them. It's pure fascistic control, right? What can those of us in the United States do to help amplify the struggle of prisoners, to do anything that we can to support your work in your advocacy for political prisoners in Palestine?
Thanks, Mohammed, for this. I think it's really, it's a bit frustrating that, like for me as a lawyer, that you don't help much on the legal level to release these detainees, especially children or women or sick or elderly. But I still believe raising the awareness is very, very, very essential and very important, and connecting the issue of the prisoners with the whole system of oppression, apartheid, and colonization. And this is the importance that we should, when we ask for dismantling the system, we should ask for the release of the prisoners, a total release, emptying the prisons. And this is the failure of the Oslo. I'm always going back, because we had this experience that Israel made agreement with the Palestinian Authority, but they insisted to keep prisoners even after signing the Oslo agreement. And this is why we are afraid that this could be repeated, because in any exchange without a basic solution or an end for the apartheid and colonization, the Israeli authorities would always find the legal way to rearrest people. Remember the exchange of 2011 with the Shalit case? 75 detainees were rearrested. More than 60 of them are still sitting there since 2011. 14 because the Israeli authorities sent them back to the life sentences that they were released from in the exchange deal based on secret information. This is how Israel is weaponizing legal tools, legal standards, laws, and on the ground, they have the power to rearrest everyone. So I think by raising awareness, by calling for releasing them all, ending the occupation and releasing them all, this is the support for the political prisoners.
Mhm. Mhm. Thank you, Sahar. We have a couple of questions that are both about children being held and detained. So what's it like for children under administrative detention? What do we know about children being held? Do international investigators ever get access to being able to support or just find more information on children being detained?
Sorry, I was muted. So children, the age of responsibility actually is 12 years old. And the Israeli authority changed the civil law applicable to the children in East Jerusalem to enable arresting those between 12 and 14 in custodial arrest. Like if they were involved in injury or death or any serious action. But now, of course, there is calls to amend it even for throwing stones or more simple actions. In the military courts, the similar, it's also 12 to 18, the definition of the child. In previous years, it was 16. For a long time, it was 16 years old up till 2012, actually, when they changed the military order. Currently, most of the children are on the age 15, 16, up till 18. And they face the same torture, the same threatening, the same physical attacks, the same collective punishments, the poor conditions, the starvation, like some of the children that they were interviewed by my colleagues, they were complaining that they cannot sleep because they are hungry. They don't have enough food. And those in administrative detention would be held in the same sections with others that they are awaiting trial. So there's no special conditions for those held under administrative detention. All of them, they would be totally disconnected from their families. And by the way, there's no ability for any international investigating body or any international UN body to come and see the conditions of the children. Even the Red Cross the visits are restricted now, totally canceled since the 7th of October. But before, if the child is under interrogation and he's banned a lawyer visit, they will ban the Red Cross representative as well. He's not able to see the child for all the period that he would be banned meet with his lawyer under interrogation, even if he's tortured. And the conditions of the children are very difficult as well. Of course, they don't receive special education or special privileges as children inside the prisons.
Great. Thank you, Sahar. I want to just take maybe one last question before we wrap. And there's a question here around, given that the Israeli courts, so military rule and the military courts in the that are used for Palestinians in the West Bank, given that it's essentially a mockery, right? I think it's, like it's a 99.7% conviction rate, which it just shows that they're kangaroo courts that are just meant to ensure the imprisonment and repression of Palestinians. The question is what other arenas can make them more fair, or what other arenas of advocacy do we have? So if you wanted to answer that, Sahad. And then there's one more question that I'm sure you can point to your website or some other place. There's a question around finding down the numbers of the detainees that you shared during your talk.
So exactly, please visit the Damir website, www.damir.org. You can see and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can receive all the updates and the figures and the conditions. On the military courts, as I said, like this system, the military system, cannot be changed in a way to make it more justice, because it was built in a purpose to maintain the oppression and the control and the unjust treatment for the Palestinians. So no matter how much, and actually this is what the occupation is doing, they changed the military. If you review the development of the military orders and the procedures and the military court, all these decades since 67 till today, you will see how much changes they and amendments they did in order to show that they have a democratic justice system, but it's not true. And I would recommend to, if you're more into reading about this system, the latest report by Francesca Albanese, the special rapporteur on Palestine, that was submitted for the Human Rights Council on June 2023. It was focusing on the military court system, and she's saying clearly that this system should be dismantled, because it's about, like, if you don't offer fair trial procedures, it's a war crime and a crime against humanity. So actually all these thousands of people, even if they are not tortured, by not offering them just procedure, fair trial, this is a war crime and a crime against humanity. So the whole system should be dismantled.
And I think that is a perfect place to end. For us at Critical Resistance, for the many abolitionists that are advocating for the dismantling of the systems of policing, of imprisonment, of surveillance, of the whole of the prison industrial complex, we have to see that our struggles are inseparable from dismantling the colonial and repressive prison industrial complex of the state of Israel.
Exactly.
Well, right. And thank you so much, Sahad. It's an honor always to be in your presence and to hear you speak. So thank you for taking the time. I know that it's also late in Palestine right now. So thank you for staying with us into the night hours, and much appreciated.
Thank you all. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you, Sahar, so much for joining us and helping us understand the central importance of administrative detention and imprisonment in the occupation, and how crucial, as Sahar said, it is that any exchange without a basic solution to end the apartheid system will always result in rearrests and recycling of Palestinian prisoners into the system of social control. So we really appreciate all of your work. We will drop information on how to stay connected to Adamir and support their work in our email, and we've done so in the links in the chat. Just a couple more, one last note for those who have stuck with us, because we will be engaging in May Day actions this week. I'm going to show you just the information for the May Day port shutdown in Oakland, which is happening on Wednesday, on May 1st, on May Day. at 4 p.m. And folks will be meeting at the West Oakland BART to organize on their way to the port. So please join us there. We are responding to a call from the Palestinian labor movement to show up to center Gaza in our work this May Day and to continue our fight for a free Palestine. Thanks again for joining us. We'll be back again next week. And as always, stay in the fight. Share this information with your comrades, and we look forward to seeing you in the streets. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.